What up, witches? Back with another occult book review. So like I said last time, the book that I'm reviewing today is Rootwork, Using the Folk Magic of Black America for Love, Money, and Success. And this is by Tayannah McQuillar. So first of all, the book is broken up into 3 different parts. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. Part 1 is Rootwork Basics. Part 2 is Elements of Rootwork. And Part 3 is Understanding Spells for Love, Money, and Success. And obviously, each of these parts break down into even smaller parts, which is where we get into all the root of the information. Before we get into all of that, though, I just want to give the definition that she gives for rootwork. So she says, rootwork is a form of folk magic that uses the elements of nature to create change in ourselves, others, and our environment. It is an African-American form of shamanism that makes use of herbs, stones, rocks, and other organic material to heal the body or mind or to solve a problem. Like all of the forms of shamanism, root workers believe that we can use the unseen forces of nature to manipulate the tangible world. I thought just right in the beginning that was a really good definition, a really good overview of what you're going to get in this book. So like I said, each section is divided into smaller sections. So in this first section, the rootwork basis is divided into what is rootwork, history of rootwork, and why and how does it work. Part 2 is the elements of rootwork. I say rootwork one more time. The elements of rootwork, which is the elements of rootwork. Talismans and charms, spirits of the dead, divinatory methods of root workers. And Part 3 is understanding spells for love, money, and success. And then it breaks down the spells for love, spells for money, spells for success. And then at the end, she sort of has like a reference section where you can find, context, obviously, so like context, supplies, and readings, the glossary of terms, and all that other stuff. Personally, Part 2 contains my favorite part of the book, which is Spirits of the Dead. I'm just going to read the first section of what she says in the Spirits of the Dead part. She says, in the past few years, there have been a renewed interest in spiritual guides and a host of books on their function in our lives. However, very few give a clear, down-to-earth explanation of who they are, what they are, and how they work. And that is exactly what she does. She just gives a very clear-cut explanation of who they are, what they are, and how they work. And like I said in the previous book review, a lot of books give a lot of fluff along with the important information. This is another book that I say just gives you the facts, the important information, just gives you exactly what you're looking for in a reference type book. And I would call this a reference type book because it is the type of book that I would go back in and that I've bookmarked some pages in even already that I would like to go back and read or just regularly reference. I also really like the section of divinatory methods for root workers because there's a whole host of methods that I had never even heard before in my life that I like that she listed and gave a very basic definition of. She obviously doesn't go into too much detail about which one, because you would need a book on each one of those if you wanted the real nitty gritty, all the information of it. But she gives just the basics of it so that if it's something that you're interested in, the basics of it, you have your starting point, and then you can find another book that expands on what you're trying to learn, which is again why I call this a more reference type book. And there's a lot of useful information in this. Now, as far as readability goes, it's very conversational, which I didn't mind too much. At first, it was a little bit weird to me because I don't think I've ever read a reference type book or informational type book where it was very conversational. I've read novels like that, but never an information book. So at first I was a little bit huh? But then once I got used to it, I'm oh, it's a conversation, it's it's more of a real, I don't really know how to explain it. It's conversational. That's what I'm going to go with. Once I got used to the fact that it was conversational, I actually really enjoyed it. I think it makes it easier to read, especially when you're dealing with information like this. You need something that you're going to understand the language of, and something where you don't need another reference book just to figure out what the heck they're talking about, which tends to happen a lot with these occult books. They like to use large words that people are what? Let's not get into the tarot book, but that was written in 1910, so we're gonna let that go. This book was actually written in 2003, which would explain the readability of it, but I still enjoy the way she's very conversational, even regardless of the readability, because the last book review I did, I said it was very easily readable. There was no like crazy language. Everything was easy to follow, but it wasn't conversational. It was written more like a textbook, whereas this is written very conversational, which I personally enjoyed. I think it puts a little bit more personality into the book and just makes it a little bit more easier to understand when someone's speaking or writing like they would speak to you. As far as readability goes, 5 out of 5. As far as information goes, once again, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I think it has great information. It covers a wide range of topics within Rootwork that I think a lot of people would be looking for just to get the information. And then of course, like she said, it covers the spells of like love, money, and success, which are very broad subjects. So obviously it breaks down a little bit in here, the different types of spells used and things like that, but still a really good reference book. There's a lot of sections in the book where it looks like this, where she's like saying something and then explaining it, saying something and then explaining it. It just gives the information in a very clear manner and very easily explains the point that she's trying to get across without any extra information filling up the space that it doesn't need to fill up. Like all we need literally is what you're trying to say and the explanation, which is what she does wonderfully. I've called it a reference book a couple of times now, but like I said, I think this is going to be one of my go-to reference books just because of the easy readability of it, how nicely everything's laid out in the book. Like the layout of the book is great. The way the information flows is great. The way it's easy to get the information is really good. I'm also very happy to be reading a book written by a Black woman. This was actually in a list of books that I saw in on Tumblr. It was like a list of spiritual, folk, magic, root work books written by Black people, like whether it's Black women, Black men, Black non-binary, whatever. It was just written by Black people, and this was one of the books in the list. But I didn't buy it because of that. I actually bought it from a recommendation from someone that recommended it to me on Instagram, and I'm really happy that I did. I'm very happy with the purchase. It wasn't too expensive. I think the hard copy was like $9-10. So as far as affordability goes, especially when it comes to occult books, they like to get into the 20s and 30s and stuff. I mean, usually that's for the older books, but still, they like to be a little pricey, and I thought this was a really good deal on the book. I think my gauge for price range on reference books or occult books is different than novels, because with novels, a $10 book, I'm like, that's kind of pricey. But for something like this, I feel like it's reasonable. I thought it was a reasonable price. Overall, I found out a lot of information that I didn't know before. I got a lot of new tools, and on top of all that, I have another reference book to add to my collection, because there have been some books that I've bought that I intended to do a review on and then read it and was like, the heck is this? And just threw it out. Like, I don't want to give it the time of day because they were that bad. So I'm happy that I have another book to add to my collection. Overall, it's definitely going to be a book that I recommend. I think it's a good book to have in your collection, particularly for people that do root work. If you don't do root work and you just want it as like information, just because you want more information on the subject, which is what I did with the tarot books, because I'm not really interested in like actually reading tarot cards. I just kind of wanted more information on it. So this would be a good book for that, especially because it has all like the clear, concise information and just like the basic definitions that you need. Good for a beginner, good for an experienced person, just good in general to have in your collection. Oh, I almost forgot, at the end of the book, she actually has a whole host. Any of the pages you see where it's like this with the gray box, it just has a whole host of spells, like things that you can put in mojo bags and just anything like that, which I really enjoyed. And like I said, the information is just clear and concise. It's the only thing on the page. It tells you the title, what it's for, the information that you need, exactly what you need. Like I said, overall, I recommend the book. I think it's good. I say go ahead and spend the money on it. Plus, you'll be supporting a Black author. As far as the next book that I'm going to be doing in this series, I'm probably going to be doing the Kabbalion. I've read some of it at one point. I've gotten like halfway through it and then I stopped. Then I forgot all the information that I read. So I'm going to try to read it again. It's not like it was a hard read. It just, I don't know, something about it. I just couldn't finish it. But I'm going to try again. We're going to try again and we're going to finish this. A lot of books heavily referenced the Kabbalion, and I read some of it, so I was able to like read the other books that reference it. But I would like to get the original, not the original information first, because obviously this is not the original, but you know, I want to get the information first. So Definitely going to be reading the Kabbalion next. We'll see how that goes. Okay, bye.